What happened that made you wonder, how on earth did I end up here? I was pumping gas when a pregnant woman ran up to me sobbing. Please, I'm begging you. Can you drive me to the hospital? My water just broke and my husband took my car keys. Why did your husband take your car keys? I asked. He's insane. He wants to kill our baby. He took my keys, so I couldn't get to the hospital. She grabbed my arm. Please, I'm having contractions. I looked at her belly and the fluid running down her legs. I helped her into my passenger seat. She was crying, breathing hard, clearly in agony. Thank you, she kept saying. Rotunda Hospital, it's 10 minutes away. As I pulled out, she showed me her phone. Texts from Ryan. You're not keeping that baby. I told you what would happen if you tried to leave. Don't test me, Sarah. He's dangerous, she gasped between contractions. Last time I tried to leave, he broke my ribs, but I have to save my baby. She screamed suddenly, gripping the door handle. Oh God, it's coming faster. Please hurry. I floored it, running a yellow light. Sarah was moaning in the passenger seat, her face bright red. He's tracking my phone, she panted. He'll follow us to the hospital. She threw her phone out the window onto the highway. I can't let him find us. I glanced over. Her dress was soaked with blood now. Is that normal? The blood? Placenta problems, she gasped. That's why I need the hospital. The baby could die. We hit traffic. Dead stop. Sarah started hyperventilating. No, we can't stop. He knows my routes. He'll check this road. Sarah, should I call 911? No. She grabbed my phone. He monitors emergency channels on his scanner. He's a cop. That's why no one helps me. I wanted to get out of this situation. But what if she delivered in my car? What if the baby died because I abandoned her? There, she pointed to an exit. Take surface streets. As I turned, she shifted, and I saw bruises all up her arms. Finger marks. Fresh ones. Did he do that today? This morning, when I said I was keeping the baby. She started sobbing. He already killed my first pregnancy. Pushed me down the stairs. We passed a police car. Sarah ducked down, terrified. That could be his partner. They all cover for him. Something felt strange, though. Her hospital bag in the back seat looked packed for a trip, not a delivery. Multiple outfits, toiletries, even a laptop. Just breathe, I said, but my instincts were screaming. She pulled out a burner phone from her bra, started texting someone rapidly. My friend works at the hospital. She'll meet us at the emergency entrance. I thought you threw your phone. That was my tracked phone. This is for emergencies. We were 5 minutes from the hospital when she got a call. She answered on speaker by accident. Did you get him? A man's voice asked. Sarah hung up instantly. Wrong number, but something in her face changed. She wasn't looking at me anymore, just staring straight ahead. Actually, can you skip the main entrance? Go to the parking garage. Level B2. My friend said it's faster to labor and delivery. I started to turn toward the garage, then noticed something. The blood on her dress had dried weird. It was too bright, too uniform, and she'd stopped having contractions completely. You know what? I should drop you at emergency. No! She grabbed the wheel. Parking garage! Now! I pulled over instead. Get out. You can't leave me. I'm in labor. Then I'll call you an ambulance. I reached for my phone. She grabbed my wrist. Hard. No weakness from pain. Drive to the parking garage, or I'll tell them you raped me. I stared at her. What? I have your DNA in my car now. I've been recording everything. Audio of you forcing me. She pulled up her dress slightly. She was wearing a wire. My boyfriend's waiting in that garage with $50,000 cash in his trunk. All you have to do is drive there. We take the money. You get $5,000 for 10 minutes of driving. You're robbing someone? My ex-husband. And yes, he really is a cop. But I'm taking what's mine from our marriage. Community property. I reached for the door handle. She pulled out a knife. Sarah, drive, or I scream rape right here. Pregnant woman, blood everywhere, your car. Who do you think they'll believe? A cop car pulled up behind us. Lights on. My heart stopped. Sarah leaned back, started moaning loudly. Help! Please! The officer approached my window. I recognized him from her phone photos. It was Ryan, her dangerous husband. His face went from concern to rage when he saw her. That's my wife, he said to me. She's off her medication. She's not pregnant. She lost the baby 3 months ago. Refuses to accept it. Sarah started screaming. He raped me! This man grabbed me! Ryan's hand went to his gun. Step out of the car! N-O-W. I looked between them. Sarah was smiling behind her tears. She'd played everyone. But now I was the one about to be shot by a cop who thought I'd kidnapped his delusional wife. My whole body went rigid, and I kept my hands on the steering wheel where Ryan could see them. Sarah's screams got louder, and she was pointing at me and sobbing about how I forced her into the car. Ryan's fingers wrapped around his gun handle, and he yelled for me to step out slowly with my hands visible. I moved like I was underwater, pushing the door open with my elbow and keeping both hands up high. My legs felt weak as I stood up, and Ryan was already moving around the car toward me. I started to say something about the gas station having cameras, but he cut me off and told me to shut up and turn around. The metal cuffs clicked cold around my wrists, while Sarah kept up her show. But when Ryan turned to call for backup, I caught her reflection in the car window, and she wasn't crying at all. Her face was calm, and she was watching everything like it was a movie. I told Ryan about the phone call where someone asked if she got him, and for just a second Sarah's eyes went wide. 2 more patrol cars pulled up with their lights spinning, and Ryan walked over to tell them I had kidnapped and assaulted his pregnant wife. The other cops looked at Sarah's bloody dress, and then at my face, and I could see them trying to figure out what happened. I kept saying we needed to check the gas station cameras and that my dash cam recorded everything, including her threatening me with a knife. Ryan told one of the younger officers to impound my car as evidence while Sarah started moaning about needing the hospital right away. An ambulance pulled up, and 2 paramedics jumped out with their bags and started checking Sarah over. She suddenly got dramatic again, grabbing her stomach and crying about contractions. One of the paramedics was pressing on her belly, and I heard him quietly tell his partner that something seemed weird about the blood on her dress. Ryan insisted on riding with Sarah to the hospital and wouldn't let anyone else near her. Another officer, younger than Ryan and less angry looking, guided me to the back of his patrol car. The back seat smelled like disinfectant and old sweat. As we drove away, I could see them loading Sarah into the ambulance, and she was still putting on her show for everyone. The young officer glanced at me in the rearview mirror and asked quietly what really happened. I told him everything from the beginning, how she ran up at the gas station crying about her water breaking, the packed bag that looked more like she was running away than going to have a baby, the burner phone, how she wanted me to drive to the parking garage, and finally the knife when I tried to leave. He wrote it all down in a little notebook, but said I would need to make a formal statement at the station. The police station was a big concrete building with bright lights that hurt my eyes. They took my phone and wallet and put them in a plastic bag. The interview room had gray walls and a metal table bolted to the floor. A camera blinked red in the corner. They told me to wait for a detective who wasn't connected to Ryan's unit. The chair was hard, and my wrists hurt from the cuffs, even though they took them off. I sat there for what felt like forever, watching the clock on the wall tick past midnight, then 1, then 2 in the morning. Finally, the door opened, and a woman walked in carrying a folder. She had short gray hair and looked tired but not mean. She sat down across from me and opened the folder, spreading out some papers. She said her name was Detective Juarez and that she needed to ask me some questions. She told me Ryan was a respected officer, but there had been some concerns about his behavior since his wife had a miscarriage 3 months ago. That made me sit up straight because Sarah had been acting pregnant, but Ryan said she lost the baby. The detective saw my reaction and nodded like she understood what I was thinking. She said the hospital exam would tell them if Sarah was really pregnant or not, but right now, they needed my side of the story. I started from the beginning again, telling her about pumping gas and Sarah running up to me. The detective wrote everything down and asked me to slow down a few times. She wanted to know exactly what Sarah said about the money in the parking garage and about the man on the phone. When I told her about the knife, she made a note to have someone check my car for it. She asked if I had any injuries from the knife, and I showed her a small cut on my hand from when Sarah grabbed my wrist. The detective took pictures of it with her phone. She said they would pull the security footage from the gas station first thing in the morning. She also said my dash cam would be really important if it caught Sarah's threats on audio. I asked if I was under arrest, and she said not yet, but they had to investigate everything properly. She left me alone again, and I put my head down on the cold metal table. The door opened again, and the detective came back in holding some papers and a small recorder. She sat down and clicked the recorder on, then told me the hospital exam was done and Sarah wasn't pregnant at all. The blood on her dress wasn't even real blood, just some kind of fake stage blood you can buy online. She needed me to go through everything one more time while she recorded it for the official file. I started again from the gas station, telling her about Sarah running up crying and begging for help, how she said her water broke and Ryan took her keys. I described the packed bag that looked more like she was running away than going to have a baby, the burner phone she pulled from her bra, and especially that phone call where the man asked if she got him. I told her about Sarah wanting me to drive to the parking garage and then threatening to say I raped her if I didn't, how she said there was $50,000 waiting there. The detective wrote everything down and said they'd get the security footage from the gas station first thing in the morning to back up my story. She left again, and I sat there for another hour before a guard finally came in and said I could make my phone call. I called the only lawyer number I knew, some public defender from a billboard I'd seen, and when she answered, I started explaining everything, but she cut me off. She told me to stop talking right away and not say another word to anyone until she got there, because false rape accusations involving a cop's wife made this really complicated. The guard took me back to the interview room, and I waited another 2 hours before my lawyer showed up, a tired-looking woman with gray streaks in her hair, carrying a beat-up briefcase. She sat down and went through my statement page by page, asking questions about specific details and making notes in the margins. When she finished reading, she looked up at me and said they were keeping me overnight while they investigated everything. She said the dash cam from my car could save me if the audio picked up Sarah threatening me about the rape accusation and the money. They took me to a holding cell with 3 other guys who didn't even look at me. Just a concrete room with benches and a toilet behind a half wall. I couldn't sleep at all that night, just kept replaying everything over and over, seeing Ryan's hand move to his gun when Sarah screamed I raped her, seeing that smile on her face behind the fake tears when she knew she had me trapped. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that car with her knife in her hand, and Ryan walking up to my window ready to shoot me for something I didn't do. The next morning, my lawyer came back looking more awake and actually smiling a little bit. She said the gas station manager had already given them the security footage, and it clearly showed Sarah running up to me in distress and me helping her into my car without any force at all. The footage showed her grabbing my arm and begging, not me forcing her into anything. The detective wanted to interview me again, but this time with my lawyer there, so we went back to that same gray room with the metal table. The detective asked more specific questions about the burner phone and exactly what Sarah said about the parking garage plan. She wanted to know what level, what the man's voice sounded like, everything I could remember about that phone call. She told me they'd already sent units to check level B2 of the hospital parking garage for any suspicious vehicles or anyone matching my description of the voice on the phone. My lawyer leaned over and told me Sarah was on a psychiatric hold at the hospital because when they examined her, they found she'd been wearing a fake pregnancy belly, one of those foam things actors use, and she had receipts on her phone for buying theatrical blood online. She said Ryan had been placed on administrative leave while they investigated everything, which meant he couldn't work as a cop until this was sorted out. Then someone knocked on the door, and the detective went outside for a minute, came back with another person in a suit who said he was from Internal Affairs. He sat down and asked me about Sarah's claim that Ryan used his police scanner to monitor emergency channels and track her. He wanted to know exactly what she said about Ryan being a cop and how that stopped people from helping her. I told him everything Sarah had said about Ryan tracking her phone and his partners covering for him. The IA guy wrote it all down and then told us they'd been looking into Ryan for a while because he'd been using department resources to track Sarah's phone through their system. He said they found multiple reports from neighbors about domestic incidents at their house, but Sarah never pressed charges, so nothing happened. The pattern they were seeing suggested both of them had serious problems. Ryan with control issues, and Sarah with mental health stuff that got worse after she lost the baby 3 months ago. The next day, my lawyer called and said they were ready to review my dashcam footage from the car. I met her at the police station where the detective had the tech guy pull up the video on his computer. The whole drive was there, every second from when Sarah got in at the gas station to when Ryan showed up with his lights on. The audio was crystal clear too, picking up everything Sarah said about the parking garage and the $50,000. You could hear her threatening to say I raped her if I didn't drive where she wanted. The detective kept pausing it and taking notes, especially the part where that man's voice came through the burner phone asking if she got him. My lawyer smiled when we heard Sarah admit she was wearing a wire and recording fake evidence against me. The tech guy burned copies of everything for the case file, and my lawyer said this was exactly what we needed to prove my innocence. Later that afternoon, the detective called to tell me they'd gotten the parking garage security footage from the hospital. The cameras showed a man sitting in a dark sedan on level B2, right where Sarah wanted me to drive. He had a large duffel bag in his passenger seat and kept checking his phone like he was waiting for someone. The license plate was visible, and they traced it to a rental car company where the guy used a prepaid credit card. But cell tower data put his phone at that exact spot during the time Sarah was in my car. The detective said they were building a solid case, and this proved Sarah had an accomplice waiting to help with whatever scheme she was running. 2 days later, my lawyer got access to Sarah's burner phone records through a court order. The phone company data showed she'd been calling the same number repeatedly for the past week before she approached me at the gas station. There were dozens of texts between them talking about the plan and how they'd split the money after they got it. The accomplice was using burner phones too, but the detective said the pattern of calls made it clear they were working together. Some of the texts mentioned meeting at an online support group, which gave them another lead to follow. My lawyer spent the next morning writing up a formal complaint against both Sarah and Ryan. She documented everything from the false rape accusation to Sarah pulling the knife on me to the attempted robbery scheme. The complaint also covered Ryan's misuse of police resources to track his wife and his aggressive response when he found us. She filed it with the district attorney's office and told me criminal charges against Sarah were almost certain. Ryan's situation was more complicated since he was responding to what he thought was a real emergency, but the tracking stuff could get him in serious trouble. 3 days after that terrifying night, I finally got the call that I was officially cleared of all accusations. The detective said the evidence was overwhelming, that I was just trying to help someone I thought was in labor. They released my car from impound and had it brought to the station for me to pick up. But when I sat in the driver's seat, I couldn't make myself turn the key. All I could see was Sarah in the passenger seat, with that knife in her hand and that smile on her face. I ended up taking an Uber home and leaving my car in the police lot for another day. The detective called again that evening with an update about Sarah's accomplice. They'd pulled security footage from several businesses near the hospital and tracked the guy to a coffee shop where he'd met with Sarah 3 times that week. The facial recognition software matched him to someone in their system who'd been arrested before for fraud. Turns out Sarah met him in an online support group for people dealing with pregnancy loss, which is where she recruited him for her scheme. He'd lost a child too, and Sarah convinced him they both deserved money from her cop husband, who she claimed was abusive. A week passed before I heard from Ryan's lawyer, who called my lawyer to set up a meeting. Ryan wanted to apologize in person and explain how Sarah's mental health had gotten so bad after the miscarriage. His lawyer kept emphasizing that Ryan never actually intended to shoot me, but was just responding to what seemed like a kidnapping. He said Ryan was devastated about how everything went down and wanted to make things right. My lawyer advised me to decline the meeting since we might still pursue civil action, so I said no through her. But Ryan's lawyer shared some information anyway about how Sarah had attempted suicide twice after losing the baby. Ryan's controlling behavior and tracking was his misguided way of trying to keep her safe from herself. He'd been checking her phone location constantly because he was terrified she'd hurt herself again if he wasn't watching. The whole situation was way more complicated than just a bad marriage. Around the same time, the detective told me about Sarah's psychological evaluation from the hospital. The psychiatrist found she had severe depression with psychotic features that started after her pregnancy loss 3 months ago. Her elaborate scheme was partly delusion, where she really believed she needed money to escape Ryan, and partly a desperate attempt to start over somewhere new. The fake pregnancy was her mind's way of coping with the loss, and she'd been wearing that foam belly for weeks before that night. The theatrical blood and props showed planning, but the psychiatrist said her grip on reality was slipping in and out. 2 weeks after the incident, they finally caught Sarah's accomplice trying to cross the state border. He ditched his car and was on a Greyhound bus when state troopers pulled it over based on a tip. The guy confessed immediately when they arrested him, saying Sarah promised him $20,000 to wait in the parking garage. He claimed he thought they were just scaring her husband into giving her money from their joint accounts. He swore he didn't know about the rape threat until the detective told him during questioning. My phone rang the next morning while I was still in bed trying to process everything that had happened. It was my boss asking where I'd been for the past 3 days since I hadn't shown up for any of my shifts. I explained about getting caught up in a police investigation after helping someone who turned out to be running a scam. He said he understood, but I could hear the doubt in his voice, like maybe I was making excuses. When I got back to work later that week, everyone already knew bits and pieces of the story. Some co-workers looked at me with sympathy, but others whispered when I walked by. One guy from shipping asked if it was true I'd been arrested for kidnapping a pregnant woman. Another person heard I'd been involved in some robbery scheme. Nobody had the facts straight, but everyone had an opinion. The gossip made every shift feel like walking through a minefield. I started eating lunch in my car just to avoid the break room conversations. A week after the incident, I stopped at a gas station on my way home, and my hands started shaking so bad I couldn't hold the pump handle. The smell of gasoline brought everything back, and I had to leave without filling up. Every sudden noise made me jump. Someone dropped a box at work, and I nearly hit the ceiling. My lawyer called to check on me and suggested I start writing down all these reactions for documentation. She said if we pursued a civil case against Sarah or even Ryan, we'd need evidence of the trauma I was experiencing. I bought a notebook and started tracking the panic attacks, the nightmares where Ryan's pointing his gun at me, the times I couldn't bring myself to help customers who approached me too quickly. 3 days later, I got a call from the district attorney's office. The prosecutor wanted to meet about pressing charges against Sarah for false imprisonment, making terrorist threats, and attempted robbery. She said with all the evidence they'd gathered, they had a strong case, but they'd need my testimony if it went to trial. The thought of facing Sarah in court made my stomach turn, but I agreed to the meeting. The prosecutor was this older woman who'd been doing this for 20 years. She walked me through what would happen if we went to trial, how Sarah's mental health issues would probably be her main defense. She said they were also charging the accomplice with conspiracy to commit robbery. That same afternoon, my lawyer called with unexpected news. Sarah's parents had contacted her office, completely devastated about what their daughter had done. They wanted to pay for my therapy and cover my lost wages from missing work. My lawyer read their statement to me. They said Sarah had been a completely different person before she lost the baby 3 months ago. They'd tried to get her help, but she kept insisting she was fine. They hadn't realized how bad her break from reality had become until it was too late. They were taking responsibility for not getting her committed when the warning signs were there. I told my lawyer I'd accept their offer to pay for therapy, but I didn't want any direct contact with them. It was too much to deal with their grief on top of my own trauma. She found me a therapist who specialized in helping people who'd been falsely accused of serious crimes. The first session was rough. The therapist, this calm guy in his 50s, had me walk through the entire incident again. He explained how being falsely accused of rape creates a specific type of trauma because it attacks your sense of safety and identity. We talked about the helplessness I felt when Sarah made the threat, and how Ryan's hand on his gun made me feel like my life could end over her lies. He said it would take time, but we could work through it. Meanwhile, the investigation into Ryan was moving forward too. Internal Affairs had been all over his case, pulling his phone records and computer logs. They found he'd been using department resources to track Sarah's phone for months, running her plates through the system without cause, even having other officers check on her when he was off duty. He hadn't done anything criminal during our incident, but the misuse of resources was serious. My lawyer heard through contacts that Ryan was cleared of criminal charges, but faced major disciplinary action. The department suspended him for 30 days without pay, and required him to complete counseling for grief and control issues if he wanted to keep his job. Part of me felt bad for him since he'd lost a baby too, but then I'd remember his hand on that gun, and the sympathy would disappear. 2 weeks after everything started, the detective called with an update. She said they'd built what she called a bulletproof case against Sarah and her accomplice. Between the gas station footage, the parking garage cameras, my dashcam audio, and the phone records, it was clear I'd been an innocent victim of their scheme. The accomplice had even confessed to his part, though he kept insisting he didn't know about the rape threat until after. The detective said Sarah's mental state was complicating things, though. Her lawyer was already pushing for a plea deal that would involve mental health treatment instead of prison time. The argument was that her psychological break after the miscarriage diminished her criminal responsibility. The DA's office seemed open to it since Sarah had documented psychiatric issues and had attempted suicide twice after losing the baby. When my therapist brought this up in our next session, I admitted I was conflicted. Part of me wanted Sarah to pay for what she'd put me through. The false rape accusation could have destroyed my entire life, but another part understood she was sick and needed help more than punishment. My therapist helped me see that her getting treatment might prevent her from doing this to someone else. Still, the trauma of being accused haunted me every single day. Then things got worse. Anonymous texts started showing up on my phone from different numbers. "You're a snitch. You ruined a sick woman's life. Rapists deserve what they get." My hands shook as I showed them to my lawyer. She immediately reported them to the police and said she suspected they were from Ryan's cop friends who believed Sarah's initial story. The messages kept coming over the next few days, getting more aggressive. "We know where you work. Watch your back. You think you got away with it." I changed my phone number, but somehow they got the new one within a day. My lawyer filed for a restraining order, but we didn't even know who to name since the numbers were all burners. The detective assigned to the harassment case said they were trying to trace the phones, but it was difficult. I stopped sleeping, started checking my locks constantly, and installed a doorbell camera. Every car that drove slowly past my apartment made my heart race. The investigation into the threats continued, but I felt like a prisoner in my own life, afraid to go anywhere alone, jumping at shadows, wondering if Ryan's friends would escalate beyond just messages. The next morning I went out to my car and found all 4 tires slashed with a note under the windshield that said, "Rapists deserve worse," in block letters. My hands shook as I took photos for evidence and called my lawyer, who told me to file another police report immediately. The responding officer seemed uncomfortable when I explained the situation with Ryan's friends, but took the report anyway and said a detective would follow up. I had to get my car towed to a tire shop, which cost me $300 just for the tow and another $800 for new tires, since my insurance wouldn't cover vandalism without meeting my $1,000 deductible first. That afternoon, I went to an electronics store and bought security cameras for my apartment, spending money I didn't really have, but feeling like I had no choice. The installation took hours, and I kept checking the windows, paranoid that someone was watching me set them up. I started taking different routes to work, leaving at random times, parking in different spots, basically living like someone in witness protection. My boss noticed I was jumpy and distracted, but I couldn't explain the whole situation without making things worse at work. 3 days later, the detective called saying Internal Affairs was now involved since the threatening messages traced back to burner phones purchased near the precinct where Ryan worked. The investigation moved fast after that, with IA pulling security footage from stores where the phones were bought and matching the purchases to 2 officers from Ryan's unit. Within a week, both officers were suspended pending criminal charges for witness intimidation and harassment. The detective said they'd admitted to believing Sarah's initial story and wanting to teach me a lesson for getting away with it, even after seeing all the evidence that proved my innocence. Their suspension made the local news, which meant everyone at my job found out about the whole situation, leading to awkward stares and whispered conversations that stopped whenever I walked by. My lawyer said the officers being charged would strengthen any civil case I might bring, but I just wanted everything to stop. About a month after that terrible night, I got a call from the prosecutor saying Sarah had accepted a plea deal for 2 years of supervised mental health treatment and 5 years probation instead of prison time. Her accomplice took a different deal for 18 months in jail, plus restitution for the damage he'd helped cause. The prosecutor explained that Sarah's documented mental illness and psychiatric evaluations showing her break from reality after the miscarriage made prison seem less appropriate than intensive treatment. Part of me was angry she wasn't going to jail, but another part understood she was sick and needed help more than punishment. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following week, and the prosecutor said my victim impact statement would be important for the judge to understand the full consequences of Sarah's actions. I spent days working with my therapist to write the statement, trying to capture how the false accusation had destroyed my sense of safety and trust, without sounding vindictive. The morning of the hearing, I threw up twice from nerves before driving to the courthouse in my new used car, since I still couldn't bring myself to drive the one from that night. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with Sarah sitting at the defense table looking nothing like the woman who'd threatened me. She was heavily medicated, moving slowly, crying quietly as her lawyer rubbed her shoulder. Ryan sat in the gallery behind her, looking older and exhausted, his uniform replaced with a wrinkled suit. When I read my statement, my voice shook as I described the terror of being accused, the harassment from the officers, the ongoing therapy, the fear that still gripped me at gas stations. Sarah sobbed louder with each word, while her parents in the front row held each other. The judge listened carefully, taking notes, asking me a few questions about the ongoing impact on my daily life. After I finished, Sarah's lawyer presented letters from her doctors, explaining her psychological state and treatment progress. The judge took a long pause before speaking, acknowledging Sarah's genuine mental illness, but emphasizing that false rape accusations cause tremendous harm to real victims and to those falsely accused. She stressed that mental illness explains behavior, but doesn't excuse it, especially when innocent people suffer serious consequences. The judge accepted the plea deal, but added strict conditions including no contact with me ever, continued psychiatric treatment with regular court monitoring and registration in a database for people who make false accusations. Sarah would also have to complete community service specifically helping actual rape victims to understand the damage false accusations cause. As we left the courtroom, Ryan's lawyer approached mine saying Ryan wanted to communicate through official channels. 2 days later, I received a formal letter where Ryan were accepted full responsibility for failing to get Sarah proper help sooner and for not protecting innocent bystanders from her crisis. He wrote that he'd been demoted to patrol officer, transferred to a different precinct across town, and required to complete mandatory counseling for grief and control issues. He apologized for his fellow officers' harassment and said he'd cooperated fully with the IA investigation that led to their arrests. 6 weeks after that horrible night, I noticed I could finally go a whole day without thinking about it constantly. The harassment had stopped completely once those officers were arrested, and I was slowly getting back to normal routines. My therapy sessions shifted from crisis management to longer-term healing, and I even managed to pump gas without having a panic attack, though I still avoided that particular station. But I couldn't shake the memories whenever I got in my car, seeing Sarah in the passenger seat, feeling that knife against my ribs, remembering her threats. After talking it through with my therapist, I decided to sell the car even though I'd lose money on it. The financial hit hurt, but the relief I felt driving away from the dealership in a different vehicle was worth every penny. My therapist helped me write detailed impact statements for the civil settlement with Sarah's family's insurance company, documenting everything from the PTSD symptoms that still woke me up at night, to the lost wages from missing work, to the ongoing therapy costs. We included receipts for the security system, the tire replacement, the therapy sessions, the lawyer fees, even the loss on selling my car. The insurance company initially offered a lowball settlement, but my lawyer pushed back hard with all our documentation. After 2 months of negotiation, they agreed to cover all my immediate losses plus therapy costs for the next year, totaling more than I'd expected, but still feeling like too small a price for what I'd endured. My boss called me into his office the next Monday morning, and I could see the worry on his face as he asked how I was doing after everything that happened with the police situation. He'd already talked to HR about making changes to help me feel safer at work, and they'd worked out a whole plan where I wouldn't have to work alone during night shifts anymore, always having at least one other person on duty with me. The co-workers who'd been whispering and giving me weird looks when the news first broke had completely changed their attitude once the truth came out about Sarah's mental breakdown and the false accusations, with several of them coming up to apologize for jumping to conclusions. I started back on day shifts only at first, my hands still shaking sometimes when customers approached me too quickly, but having someone else always nearby helped me feel less jumpy and paranoid. 2 weeks into being back at work, I got a call from the gas station manager where everything started, and he told me he'd been thinking about that night constantly and had made major changes to protect both his employees and customers. He'd installed 12 new security cameras covering every angle of the pumps and parking lot, upgraded the lighting to eliminate dark spots, and trained all his staff to recognize signs of someone in distress who might be running a dangerous scam or having a mental health crisis. He said my situation had opened his eyes to how vulnerable people are when they're just trying to help someone, and he wanted me to know that what happened wasn't my fault for being a good person who tried to help. His words hit me harder than I expected, and I had to sit down after the call, realizing this was the first time someone had explicitly said I wasn't to blame for trying to do the right thing. 3 months had passed since that night, and my therapy sessions had shifted from twice-a-week crisis management to once-a-week regular appointments, with my therapist noting real progress in how I was processing the trauma. I could pump gas now without having a full panic attack, though I still drove 5 extra miles to avoid that particular station where it all started, and I'd stopped constantly checking my rearview mirror for police cars following me. My sleep had improved too, going from maybe 2 hours of broken nightmares to actually getting 5 or 6 hours most nights, though I still sometimes woke up feeling phantom knife pressure against my ribs. My lawyer called one afternoon with an update from Sarah's treatment facility, saying her parents had been sending regular reports through legal channels about her progress on medication and therapy. Sarah had stabilized significantly on antipsychotic medication and was starting to accept what had really happened that night, expressing genuine remorse for the trauma she'd caused me during her psychotic break. Her parents included a letter saying they were grateful everyone had survived the crisis without physical violence, and that their daughter was finally getting the help she'd needed for years, but had refused until the court mandated it. The facility reported she was responding well to treatment and participating in group therapy sessions, where she was learning to recognize her triggers and early warning signs of another potential break. A thick envelope arrived from Ryan's lawyer the following week, containing a formal letter Ryan had written as part of his mandated counseling program, where he had to acknowledge the harm his actions and inactions had caused. He wrote that he'd completed 6 months of intensive therapy, focusing on grief processing and control issues, finally understanding how his denial about Sarah's mental illness and his attempts to control the situation had enabled her dangerous behavior. He'd filed for divorce and was focusing entirely on his own mental health recovery, attending both individual counseling and a support group for people whose spouses have severe mental illness. He thanked me for not pressing additional charges against him, despite the terror he'd put me through that night with his gun and his initial belief in Sarah's lies, acknowledging that his position as a police officer had made everything exponentially worse. 6 months after that terrifying night, I realized during a work conversation that I could finally tell parts of the story without my voice shaking or my hands trembling, though certain details still made my chest tight. The experience had taught me more about mental health than I'd ever wanted to know, but I understood now how untreated trauma and grief could spiral into dangerous delusions that put innocent people at risk. I'd started volunteering twice a month with a local victims advocacy group, sharing my story in a support group for people who'd faced false accusations, finding that helping others process their own experiences actually helped me continue healing from mine. The group leader said my story was particularly powerful because it showed how mental illness, while explaining someone's behavior, doesn't excuse the harm they cause, and how important it is for victims of false accusations to get support and validation. My life had found a new rhythm that felt mostly normal, though I was definitely more cautious now about helping strangers, always looking for inconsistencies in their stories and trusting my instincts when something felt wrong. I kept pepper spray in my car now and had taken a self-defense class, not because I lived in fear, but because I wanted to feel prepared if I ever found myself in another dangerous situation. Looking back at everything, I felt grateful that I'd survived that night without anyone getting shot or stabbed, and genuinely relieved that both Sarah and Ryan were getting professional help instead of spiraling further into violence and delusion. All right, that's all from me today, folks. Thanks for letting me poke around and throw some questions out there with you all. It's always fun hanging out like this. Subscribe for more content like this.